In this lecture on Collins and salvation, I want to take a little closer look at what Collins calls the conjunctivity of the gospel, at least as understood by Wesley. I talked about this in class as Wesley's ability to take things which are normally held as either or and to say, no, they're not going to be either or, they're going to be both and. And it's that conjunctivity, that willingness and that ability to bring things that don't normally come together and to bring them together that separates Wesleyan theology from other types of theology. Collins states this more clearly in the first chapter of his book when he leads out the table on the conjunctions of God's grace and salvation. These are the things in which he lays out. This is the work of God alone, but rather it's a divine human cooperation. He holds those two things together. God does it alone, and yet we respond and yet we receive. God does it alone, but we not have a part to play. That's stating it too strongly. But we must accept it. We must agree with it. He highlights both the favor of God and the empowerment of God at the same time. Favor of God in the sense that you are God's chosen, God's elect, and we're very grateful for that. The empowerment of God, you are able to become holy and to become righteous. Those two things together at the same time. Most theologies in his day and in ours separate those two and make it either or instead of both and. He held in tension together receiving God's grace and responding to God's grace. That both things are true at the same time. We receive it and we respond to it. It's instantaneous. He held that intention with the fact it's a process. There's a process that comes before our salvation where God is wooing us, courting us, making us more like Him, making us understand more of Him. And then there's that instant when we step over the line. Same thing is true with entire sanctification. We grow in grace and we grow in grace and we grow in grace, and then there's that spot where, oh, now I'm in it. It really is a good thing that he held these in tension. And then the Protestant emphasis of sola fide, sola faith, sola grace, and the Catholic emphasis of there's a little bit of works in here. Oh, there's a little, he held those two things in tension and together. And as we stated in a lecture that we had in Dayton, this is the genius of Wesley's theology. That he could bring disparate things together and hold them together so that we could have all of the benefits at the same time. That wonder, that greatness of his theology is what makes prevenient grace, justifying grace, sanctifying grace, and glorifying grace the wonder of what it is. God is in the process of restoring us back to where we would have been if it wasn't for the fall of Adam and Eve, and if it wasn't for our own sin, our own rebellion against God in our lives. He's in that process, and in that process, He makes us whole, where we can respond and we should respond, where we can have a place, even if He must start it. And it's that ability to hold those separate things in tension. And instead of an either or, it's a both and. Instead of as separate entities, it's conjunctives. Those tensions that allow Wesley and thus us to have what I believe is a more full-orbed understanding of the Scripture. To know that it's not just either or, but it's both and. It's a conjunction as God works His grace out to us for our salvation.